He goes on to write, "It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that from that time forward, I was on some kind of substance nearly every day for the rest of my life, all the way up until fairly recently." Greetings, everyone. A message or two back, I talked to you a little bit about my book, Finding the Real Jesus. And you can see that on the music stand behind me, right next to Everything Matters. Finding the Real Jesus is a small book. It's under 100 pages that I wrote to reach the unsaved. But not just any old unsaved. It's for the Jesus haters. People who have seen the apostasy and corruption in the churches. They've turned on the televisions. They see the horrible, despicable televangelists, their money schemes, their prayer cloths, their snake oil, their give to get, their prosperity gospel, their jets, and their posturing, and the list goes on. And people hate Jesus because of those people. And that's who I want to reach. I want to reach people who don't know the real Jesus and have no idea. They just hate Jesus because of hypocrites who call themselves Christians. That's why I wrote this book. The first 5 chapters is addressed to those people specifically. Chapter 6 is testimonies, and that's the reason I'm making this video, because I didn't tell you about that the last time around. There are 4 testimonies by 4 people that have been badly damaged by the institutional church system, but have never given up their faith in Jesus. And they are remarkable people, and I'm honored to know these people. And when I started writing this book, I approached these 4 people and asked them, "Will you share your testimony?" And they all agreed. And so I'm going to read you a little bit from one of the testimonies, and perhaps in some other messages I can read you some of the other testimonies. But I want you to know that these are real people who came through hell to find the real Jesus. And they're an inspiration to me. And so I know they'll be an inspiration to you, and more particularly, in the context of the book, I give the book away to Jesus haters. People I talk to, atheists, agnostics, people who have no idea of any religion, or maybe they are quasi-Buddhists, or they're spiritual, or whatever, but they hate Jesus. And they make that very clear. And they say things like, "I could never be a Christian. Look at the hypocrisy. Look at the kind of people it produces. The Benny Hinns, the Kenneth Copelands, the Creflo Dollars, the Ravi Zachariases." The list just goes on and on. So I thought, I've got to talk to those people and be able to give them something of value to them. I know they're not going to read the Bible. Most Christians don't read the Bible. They skip around. How many people read the Bible cover to cover, page 1 to the end, and then start over? Not very many. And so I know they're not going to read the Bible. I'd love to give them a Bible, but it's a waste of time. First, I have to address the things that they have embraced, the paradigms, the false ideas about Jesus, because of the hypocrites calling themselves Christians. So that's the first 5 chapters. But let me grab the book. Finding the Real Jesus. I guess he's left the building, hasn't he, folks? Let me turn to chapter 6. See if I can find that quickly. Hopefully you can see that. I'm trying to peek around. Chapter 6. Testimonies. none should perish. And then on my right, you'll see the title Broken Home, and by Mike Scarborough. So let me read you a little bit of that. I'm going to skip down a couple of paragraphs. And I'm going to skip around a little bit. I'm not going to read paragraph to paragraph. It's something you can do on your own. I was a very confused and angry child. I caused a lot of terrible damage to my family. A couple of instances I remember were me stabbing my sister's doll in the face repeatedly with a pen until it was unrecognizable, and then hiding it in a cubbyhole in our basement. I pushed my dresser drawer through my bedroom door, ripped my curtains down in a blind rage, and on it went like this. I was very angry. My temper got so out of control that my parents felt I was a danger to them and my siblings, and they had to put me in foster care. This is where I was first introduced to the drug scene. It started simple. First, it was wine mixes from a friend's dad's supply, and then I began stealing my foster mom's cigarettes to feel the head-on rush they brought me. I vividly remember watching the movie Top Gun and puffing on them, and loved it. Not long after that, I found my new favorites, THC and LSD. To me, I felt I had arrived at home. I'll just provide a little bit of commentary. You have to know that Mike was raised in a Lutheran church. Earlier in the story, he tells you about that. He writes, my dad ended up plugging our family into a local Lutheran church. Every Sunday he went to church, and he says he hated it. But they were Sunday faithfuls, and eventually that dwindled away. But this is somebody who did come out of an institutional church. Now he goes on to write, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that from that time forward, I was on some kind of substance nearly every day for the rest of my life, all the way up until fairly recently. Whether it was alcohol, pills, pot, or anything I could get my hands on to help me numb my life out. I wallowed in my sin. I had to have it. I couldn't get enough. Job chapter 15 verse 16 had me pegged. How much more abominable and filthy is man, which drinketh iniquity like water. Once I was old enough to live on my own, I found another outlet. Sexual sin. The drugs I continued to tamper with only grew in potency. Crack cocaine, crystal meth, heroin, and again, essentially anything and everything I could put inside my body for pleasure's sake. But even the drugs weren't satisfactory enough. I needed more. Now I'll jump down a few paragraphs. Be fun if you get the book. You can read and fill in the blanks. I know you'll be inspired by the stories, and I know you will want to give the book to people you know that hate Jesus. Help them find the real Jesus. That's what the book is for. So he writes, I was so lost. Many years later, exhausted by it all, but by no means finished. I found myself hitchhiking around Canada, trying to find my place in life, sleeping on the streets, or any place that would have me for a night. I had accumulated many warrants for my arrest at that point. I had also made enemies in the drug world. So I started feeling like the walls were closing in around me. My hunger for sin was still very much alive. Yet my habits leveled out to basically smoking pot, drinking liquor, and pornography. Anyway, I'll give you a little summary in my own words. Mike eventually ended up in a small town in British Columbia, and at the end, ready to jump off a bridge and end it all. Something stopped him, and he went to the Salvation Army, and that's where the help began. And he confessed everything. He said the police came, they treated him with respect. They didn't keep him in jail for long. And here's the quote, here's what the officers said. And this is what Mike wrote, I quote, "The world would be a better place if everyone would just take responsibility like this." That's what Mike said, the officers said. And he was treated with respect. Anyway, it wasn't over. He ended up in another kind of institutional church, but one of these very wacky, emergent type churches. A vineyard church where the occult manifestations are everywhere. And he knew it, and others knew it, and they just didn't know where to turn. But eventually, God pulled him out of there. He ended up going to college, and he says he basically made a debacle of that. I'll leave the story at that. He didn't really finish the story the way he wanted to, and so it kind of ends abruptly. And I know there's more things he wanted to say about where he got to from the druggy life, the vineyard, charismatic Pentecostal kind of thing, and where he is today. But in the course, he got married. He's got a son. He has a daughter, and he's a different person. And it's an inspiration. And the other stories, there's Garth Kennedy's story. Garth was a male prostitute in LA. There's John Dewar's story coming out of the Catholic Church and the chastening. There's John Dewar's brother's story as a drug addict and dying, coming back to life. And Connie Stifler's story. It's tragic what this person has been through in the institutional church system. But she has a great discernment, as do all the people who have graciously allowed me to publish their testimonies. And so I encourage you, get the book, get a bunch of them, and hand them out. Look, if you don't have an evangelist ministry, that is, if you're not participating in the Great Commission, we're all supposed to go out in the world and preach the gospel. Everybody. You, me, it doesn't matter who. If you don't have a plan, this can be your plan. This is my plan. You know, sometimes it's hard to get into things in depth with people you meet and you talk to about Jesus. For various reasons. It's on the street, it's in a store, it's at a friend's house, this kind of thing. Some kind of a social thing. But when you've got something you can give them of value, something that's attractive, they're not going to throw it out. That leaves a lasting impression. And that's one of the reasons I have a book. My wife meets people at work all the time. She'll give them a book. She doesn't have time to get into the details. Think of it as an evangelism plan. God bless, and thank you for listening.